I, Rowan, an alpha werewolf, am entangled in a forbidden love affair. I yearn for Fiona, whose hue and warmth and fairy, like beauty, are irresistible to me. However, she is the daughter of my greatest enemy, Cormac Quinn, a scientist who has pushed my people to the brink of extinction. In this whirlwind of love and hate, I am forced to choose between the safety of my pack and the love in my heart. Do I embrace my destiny or betray my instincts? Chapter 13, An Alpha's Bond and Confession. Rowan's POV. We backed out of the room, giving my brother and Cat privacy to continue what they were doing or get dressed. I didn't care to think about it very much. In one way, I was relieved, thinking perhaps Rian would stop lusting over Fiona. Even though I could never mark her as mine, I wouldn't stand by as my brother tried to woo her. But this recent development had produced more problems since neither of us couldn't afford to be involved with Fiona or Cat for obvious reasons and then some. Well, now that I know where she is, Fiona said, shaking her head, I'm sorry I got so worked up and should have foreseen something like this. Cat has her. She looked at me with blush, stained cheeks, searching for the words and tapping her chin. Let's just call it an enormous appetite for the opposite sex. There's nothing to apologize for. Fiona, after everything you have been through in the last few days, especially yesterday, I don't blame you for not wanting to be alone. Hoping to put her at ease, and tried in vain to tear my eyes from her. She stood against the wall in the shadowy hallway, looking so beautiful it should have been a sin. Her two-sword, long, wavy hair matched the straps of her black tank top, and the tiny sleep shorts she wore showed off her toned legs to perfection. She smiled back, but narrowed her eyes at me. Why are you being so kind when I was just getting used to your abuse? Fiona folded her arms under her chest, and my eyes drifted to her breasts. She cleared her throat, dropped her arms, and frowned. Oh, she had busted me big time. Listen, I now know you had nothing to do with things concerning your father, nor do you condone his actions. Plus, you are making it harder and harder to be nasty to you. I watched her eyes widen and felt our connection growing with intensity, our bond allowing me to read her thoughts. She wanted me as much as I wanted her. I thought you enjoyed being nasty to me. Fiona studied me, her round, suspicious eyes piercing my soul, causing my pulse to quicken. No, I hated it, I confessed, shaking my head. But it was for the best. Trust me on that. But you make it so bloody difficult. Her confusion was my undoing as she cocked her head to the side, and I focused on the curve of her neck, my inner wolf begging me to mark her as mine. I swallowed hard past the lump in my throat. This last had me tied in knots. Why was it for the best? You seemed to like me the night we met in the club. If you only knew. I raked a hand through my hair in frustration. Tell me then. She pushed off the wall, standing far too close, her scent surrounding me, and placed her hands on her lush hips. You're a human or part fairy, lass, and you were driving me mad. The sadness in her gaze gutted me. I'm sorry for being such a pain in the ass. She dropped her arms to her sides and made a move to flee. I grabbed her elbow. Fiona, you are the sweetest and sexiest pain in the ass ever. And that's the problem. I groaned in annoyance at my no-win situation. She jerked free from my grasp. You aren't making any sense. And I'm tired of your games. To our agent extraordinaire, Madeline Noban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I'm going back to bed. Good night. Wait, I pleaded, holding my palms up. There's so much you don't know or understand. Fiona, then tell me so I'm not so damned confused. She stood with defiance, her eyes slit in displeasure, looking exasperated. Don't you feel it? You are my. I bit my lip to keep from revealing the truth. I'm weak for you. Lass, I admitted instead. If I told her she was my fated mate after everything she'd been through, I feared she'd have another anxiety attack. Fiona laughed and pointed at her chest. You are weak for me, why? Because I'm attracted to you. But it can never be. As a human, or part fairy, and a hunter's daughter, You would put my pack and family at risk. At least that much was true. I already know all this. She scoffed. Good night, Alpha Wolf. Again, Fiona turned to leave, but I took her arm and pulled her flush against my body, slamming my lips over hers as I backed her against the wall. She stiffened beneath the onslaught of my hungry mouth, and I heard the surprise in her intake of breath. I cupped the sides of her face, running my hands down her neck. She moaned, giving in to the kiss, as I grazed slow, alluring circles on her delicate skin with my thumb. Her hands reached around me, fisting the back of my t-shirt, and she no longer fought the mutual desire. Fiona's full lips opened, allowing me to explore the delights of her tongue as her passion unleashed, matching mine, with her hands now in my hair, pulling my face closer. The kiss turned into something primitive. Our moans of pleasure merged, and the sound alone had me on the verge of something I never imagined in my wildest dreams, teetering right at the edge, ready to fall off. She pulled her swollen mouth from mine, peppering small kisses along my neck, jaw, and ear. I feel it now. Rowan, she whispered in a growl before nipping my ear and drifting back to my neck, raking her teeth across the sensitive skin just below my ear and pursuing her way back to my mouth with her tongue before biting my bottom lip. With my head thrown back and eyes closed, I surrendered myself to her, my breaths coming quick, my mind, body, and soul aroused like I had never experienced before. Fiona. Knock her. You fool. It is your destiny. She is your Luna and belongs to you. There's not a wood bitch alive that will complete you as she does. Do it. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Milburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfading patience, enthusiasm. My inner wall fought at me, breaking the spell I was under. With great reluctance, I tore from the intensity of our embrace and stumbled backward, away from the tempting minx. My breathing harsh and labored, her eyes enlarged as she reached up, touching her red, swollen lips, and her chest rose and fell as a strange expression came over her face that I couldn't decipher. I shouldn't have done that, I whispered, glancing at her, noticing how enticing she looked with some color back in her face aglow from our amorous encounter that made me want to carry her to my bedroom. I stared down at the carpet. Thinking shit. I kept my voice low, unsure if she heard me, but Fiona remained speechless with her mouth agape. What the hell is going on out here? Ryan stood just outside his door with Kat by his side, gaping at the scene before them. Fiona and I breathing hard and looking disheveled. What in the hell were you thinking? I asked my brother the following morning as we sat in the privacy of my office. It's not like I gave it any thought. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Milburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. She threw me all the signs, if you know what I mean. Ryan grinned with a wink. Don't be a cheeky bastard. You know exactly what I mean, bro. These are not the type of women to toy with. And you know why. Ryan scoffed and leaned forward, placing his palms on his knees. You're right one to talk, eh? I caught you toying with Fiona right outside my bedroom door after you bombarded me with your meddlesome interaction last night. So what's the difference? He pointed at Rowan. And don't you dare give me that. I'm the alpha line. I threw my head back and groaned. Listen, it was a moment of weakness on my part that resulted in a mere kiss. He shrugged his shoulders. I didn't bed her. So what? Rian ventured. You were scolding me like a child for having a bit of crack with Kat. She wanted to give it all Ash, and was more than willing since she started it. He wagged his brows before continuing. And if you haven't noticed, she's a colleen. A right bonny lass. What a load of bollocks. You could have your pick of feck in birds. Rian. But these two are off limits. To us both. If I can resist Fiona, then what's the story there? Mate, I've never seen you act the way you do around her. 1 minute you're a nasty ass, and then I find you playing it up in the hall. He raised his brows, grinning. Not that I blame you. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Milburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. That's a special bird right there. She's the woman every man dreams of finding. He had a faraway look in his eyes, and I took a few deep breaths to calm my inner wolf, who was ready to shift and devour my brother. It was time for me to come clean and his unrealistic fantasies about Fiona, my Colleen, my bird, my bonny lass, my Luna, and my mate. If I couldn't have her, he damn sure wouldn't. I knew he meant every word by the gleam in his eyes and how he spoke. Rian held a torch for Fiona, and I was about to extinguish it. You're right, little brother. Fiona is special, but I'm not referring to your specific notions about her. I leaned back in my chair, steepling my hands under my chin, trying to gather my thoughts in order. I'm speaking to you now, not as your elder brother, but as your alpha. Anytime I reminded Rian of my wreck, he hated it, and I kept my eyes focused on the ceiling inside before looking at him. Rian crossed his arms, displaying annoyance, which was at odds with his expression of curiosity. Go on. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. This is serious, Rian, and I need your word of honor that this conversation goes no further than this office. I glared at him, and he nodded. It was enough for me. Rian knew that I was being serious, and despite sibling rivalry, I trusted him more than anyone else. There's more to this with Fiona, more than her being a human, or hybrid. It goes beyond a father being an evil hunting bastard, as well. I stood and walked from behind the desk, raking a hand over my face and pacing the room. Rian turned around, his gaze following my erratic footsteps. I had his attention, but he gave me the time I needed, remaining silent while I roamed the room. My hands were shaking as I made my way to the minibar to pour a whiskey. Yes, it's early, but care to join me? To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Mate, if you're having a gargle this early, it must be serious. So, stole the ball and pour me one, too. I peered over my shoulder and saw Rian was now on his feet, pacing as well. I handed him the glass, and he eyed me with wariness before raising it. SL&T. I raised mine as well. Yeah. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Bro, we Ray gonna need some Irish luck. We both down the fiery liquid in one go. Ugh, I said with a grimace as the liquor burned going down before I felt its relaxing effects and knew it was time to unburden myself. Well, lay it on me. Rian's eyes gaped into mine. Inquisitive and apprehensive, Fiona is my mate, I declared, my tone sharp and clipped, leaving my gregarious brother speechless. Well, things are getting intense, and ready to take off. I hope you enjoyed the chapter. Here's a list of some Irish slang terms I used in this chapter. SL&T, cheers crake, a term used to describe a good time bird's a female colleen, a term often used to refer to a beautiful charming woman having a gargle, to have beer or alcohol give it a lash, to give it a go or do it bonny lass, a pretty girl. Chapter 14, sibling rivalry and spiteful witches. Rowan's POV. I knew something was wrong. You have been acting so strange around Fiona, and now it all makes sense. Rian slapped his forehead. And just how would you act? Huh, little brother. I arched a brow and gritted my teeth. It wouldn't do any good to be upset, so I tried to relax. Yet, how Rian stared at me, studying my face, was unnerving. It was uncanny how skilled he was at deciding how others felt. Rian's empathic nature and heightened werewolf instincts gave him an almost telepathic ability to feel and interpret others. I was a believer in fate, while others were not. And I've always thought fate was why I was born first. Rian was strong, loyal, and capable, but far too sentimental to be an alpha wolf. However, he would disagree with my theory and opinion. I would have marked her as mine. That's what I would have done. Rian scowled at me, and I saw a muscle in his jaw clench as he folded his arms across his broad chest, nostrils flaring. I laughed without mirth and stomped to my desk, and sat down hard. Yeah, mate, I know. You would have marked her without a thought or care. But that's the difference between us, isn't it? I can't mark her as mine. You bloody idiot. He advanced toward my desk and slammed his hands down, jarring the photo frames in my mug. That's right. Big bro. You can't mark her. Your own bloody mate. The woman fate has chosen for you. Why, one might wonder. He was leaning down at eye level with me, and his face contorted in pure fury. Because you're the big bad wolf, Elsa. It was getting harder to control my temper, but I tried. Listen, Rian. I raked a restless hand through my hair and sighed. She's part human, for feck's sake, and her father is a notorious hunter and mad scientist, causing us all so much grief right now. I feel in my bones he was involved with Sexflex. Hell, I bet good money he created it. Let's not forget all of our missing pack members. To my agent extraordinaire, Rian and I, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I gave him a sidelong glance and observed his breathing calm. We got some of them back, but still many are missing. He's responsible for most of them. And you want me to take his daughter as my Luna? I shook my head and glowered back at him, feeling spent. Did he think this was easy for me? I had longed for my mate, hoping to find her for many years. An alpha was nothing without their Luna. It was like living without a limb. Rejecting her would be hell. Lady Fate had dealt me a bad hand. Indeed, so much for my loyalty to her. For werewolves or shifters, our fated mate was the core of our existence, and they defined us. You could have all the lovers you wanted, but your destined partner was your missing half, the other part that strengthens you, making you whole. Even without marking her as mine, Fiona was bound to me since I found her created for me, and by for her. Destiny bonded us to one another, linked forever, until death. What a proper load of shite. Mate. Rian shook his head, taking a seat in front of me. Perhaps he felt deflated now too. Don't you understand how dangerous and complex this is? My tone subdued and careful. Rian seemed calmer, and we both needed clear heads for this discussion. Regardless of your feelings on the matter, you know to keep this to yourself. Right eye. He crossed one leg over his knee, nodding. You have my word. To my agent extraordinaire, Rian and I, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It was enough for me because Rian was keen on loyalty. Regardless of our squabbles, we were brothers, a mere 20 months apart, with disagreements, even physical fights, as all siblings do. But when it involved our pack, I trusted him with my life. If the others were to know that Cormac Queen's daughter is my mate, and she's not only human but part fairy, I lifted my brows and stared at Rowan, leaving the obvious and said, it will cause unrest within the clan. Rian ventured, his face falling. Unrest is putting it mildly, but if I leave her unmarked, we will be safe from the repercussions. You understand that I have to put the pack first, right? As long as I remain focused, controlling my need for her, it would be a moot point. Yet I knew it would be a difficult struggle. I would have to send her and Kat away as soon as possible, but I would still feel Fiona's presence, even from afar, and I would yearn for her at every turn. But it was the only way. After many sleepless nights, I couldn't find any other solution. Fiona and her father were clueless and would remain that way. It was hard enough for wolves to recognize, let alone humans. Unless I marked her, Fiona's emotional connection and attachment to me would not go any further. We never knew when fate connected us, but we realized finding our mate would end our suffering. However, my anguish would continue, but as long as we buried this secret, no one else would ever know. Yes, and I'm so sorry. To my agent extraordinaire, Rian and I, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Rian glanced at me before averting his eyes, staring toward the window. I wish there was a way. There's not, and taking her as my Luna would endanger us all. I admire your responsibility to us, but having her by your side would make you an even better alpha. And you know it. He retorted with heat, his gaze back on mine. Yes, I know. But you forget I'm the new Alpha O'Connell and the risk is too great. The council hasn't even sworn me in yet. For God's sake. When my father died, the Alpha title passed to me after his last breath. However, it wasn't official from the council, nor would there be a coronation while everything was on hold. Since the increase of missing pack members, the unusual amount of hunter attacks, and the new Sexflex epidemic, we had been at a standstill for almost a year. I'd have to live a life filled with resentment and regret, giving up my Luna, but being Alpha O'Connell was my birthright in Fiona, my fated mate. Honor and duty took precedence over my happiness. True, Rian ventured as a knock sounded on the door before he could say any more. It was Kyra and Me, the healer. I had sent my sister to assist her since my mother was still in London. Me bowed her head. My lord, how are the wounded faring? Hoping for some good news. She shook her head. Physically they are improving daily, but emotionally, well, it's going to take some time. Maev blew out a long sigh. You can't imagine what that bastard has done to them. Please, excuse my language, my lord. Her withered face coloured, and she stared at the floor. Maev, he's a bastard, and you are free to speak your mind in front of me. I gave her a tight smile, trying to control my twitching lips. What I found nothing amusing concerning Quinn's evil deeds. Watching Maev, who attended to me as a lad, trying to control her tongue, was quite comical. They are all shattered inside from what that lunatic has done to them. When I think of those innocent children, the wee bairns, Maev choked up, and what they've been through, it sickens me. She shook her head, appearing to hold back tears. Please let their families know we will provide the best support money can buy. I assured her, and thank you, Maev, for all you have done. You're welcome, my lord. It is my pleasure. And Kyra has been an enormous help to me. She deserves your gratitude. As well. Such a fine, young lass. Maev turned to Kyra and winked. Kyra smiled with a blush staining her cheeks. Speaking of providing support, she seemed to falter, glancing at Maev, who nodded for her to continue. Well, Maev and I agree we should contact the witches for help. I watched her swallow hard and knew she feared my response. But my brother beat me to it. Why in the hell would we call on those spiteful creatures? They are selfish, crazy women. He cringed and looked at me, shaking his head. I wasn't fond of witches. To my agent extraordinaire, Marilyn Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. They were cunning and conceited individuals, but had immense power and effective spells. We need their magic to heal the wounds on the inside, Maev said as she tapped the side of her head. I fear the young may never be the same after what Cormac Quinn has subjected them to. The cruelty they suffered is unimaginable. The healer looked at the floor, wringing her hands. As I listened to Maev and watched tears well up in Kyra's eyes, it filled me with an intense rage. My hatred for Quinn grew by leaps and bounds and reiterated my resolve to stay away from Fiona. Even though she was nothing like Quinn and held no responsibility for her father's crimes, my pack wouldn't see it that way. I'm sure you're right, Maev, but let's run it past the council first. Hoping to put her at ease, they have already agreed and think it's our best option, Kyra announced with a mischievous smile, but they are leaving it up to you. As Alpha, you have the last word. Rian rolled his eyes, and I wasn't sure if he was upset about asking the witches for a favor or the council recognizing me as Alpha. Well then, I have the perfect witch in mind, and I'll see if I can get in touch with her, I said with a smile while Rian continued to sulk and grimace. Thank you. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I'm happy to hear this news. I will leave and return to the sick and share this information with them and their families. She turned with a smile for Kara and hugged her. Now, you get some rest. Nurse, you can come back tomorrow. The older Huda bowed and left with a skip in her step. Before we could discuss anything else, I heard a soft knock, and I yelled. To my agent extraordinaire, Rian and I, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Fiona opened the door, peeking her head inside and looking nervous. May I come in? Kyra squealed. Yes, come in. I just returned and hoped you and Kat would watch a movie with me. My sister held her hands out as Fiona approached with a shy grin, avoiding my gaze. When I was this close to her, my inner animal became restless. I felt Rian's gaze and frowned at him, shaking my head. This was hard enough without him pressuring me. We would be glad to, Fiona responded, squeezing my sister's outstretched hands. I just came in to see what everyone was doing and to remind your brother that he owes me a file of information and photos. She peered at me over Kyra's head with a pointed expression. Oh, and Cormac called. He found my note and was checking in on me and Kat. Why didn't you tell me? What did he say? I asked in a rush, feeling my heart speed up. To my agent extraordinaire, Rian and I, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Slow down. Fiona held up her palm. That's Alpha Wolf. You'll love. My brother informed her with a wink and cheeky grin I wanted to wipe from his face with my boot. The absolute nerve of Rian was astonishing. I had only just told him that Fiona was my mate. That I couldn't claim her made it that much worse. Fiona chuckled, and my annoyance rose. Well, I'll tell the Alpha Wolf everything my father said as soon as he hands over the folders. She turned from smiling at Rian and glowered at me. Hands on hips. About that. To my agent extraordinaire, Rian and I, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Squirming in my chair. I want to go through them with you first. If that's okay. She nodded, and her face softened. Fair play. Her answer was quick and unexpected, catching me off guard. But when will that be? Fiona folded her arms and arched one perfect, dark brow. Soon. But right now, Rian and I have to summon a witch. It was hard not to chuckle, watching her expression as it changed. She looked irresistible with her mouth open and her eyes wide as plates. Fiona uttered with a quick shake of her head from shock. I had to remind myself this was all strange territory to her. While Fiona stood there looking stunned but curious, I suppressed the laugh bubbling up from my chest. And I finished my editing project last night around this time, and the publisher in China emailed me at midnight asking me if I could edit another one in 10 days. Well, I have 10 days to get a ton of writing done. I hope you all enjoyed the chapter I threw together today. To my agent extraordinaire, Rian and I, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Chapter 15. Imagined hell under which named via a second draft Viole's POV. After that unexpected kiss from Rowan last night, my dreams consumed me once I drifted back to sleep. They were confusing, frightening, and more like nightmares. Something followed me as I ran through an unfamiliar forest, its footsteps deafening. The sound of cracking twigs and the grunt of the chase surrounded me. I tripped over a moss-covered log and went down, stopping my fall with my ponds and spider, crawling to evade capture. Once back on my feet, I continued to race through the woods and glanced over my shoulder to find Rowan. To my agent extraordinaire, Rian and I, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Why was he chasing me? Stop. Lass. You're going to injure yourself. Come to me, and I'll keep you safe. He yelled to my retreating form. I peered over my shoulder, saw his beaming face, and came to an abrupt stop. Out of breath, I leaned over, hands on my knees to calm my erratic rate and breathing, listening to his slowed steps approaching me. I was dizzy from exhaustion but relieved to no longer be in danger. As I turned to greet him with a smile, a scream stuck, lodged in my throat. Realizing I was face to face with the drug-pushing vampire from the club, the creature threw her head back and cackled, the sound crazed enough to wake the dead, and he looked at me as I stood frozen from fear, unable to speak or move. The vampire's eyes were solid black orbs, and blood covered his long, sharp teeth and dripped onto his chin. He cocked his head, still regarding me, and grinned before lunging forward, a long black cape floating behind him. A piercing scream rent the air as I scrambled away from the demon, like monster, stumbling over sticks and rocks, but somehow kept myself from slipping. I resisted the urge to glance behind me and kept running. "Fiona," my father called. "Wait, why are you running from me?" I peeked over my shoulder to see my father in his lab coat and a dark-haired fairy smiling beside him. "Don't you want to meet your mother?" The word mother stopped me short. I felt dizzy and was now in a white, sterile room filled with metal beds, strange devices, and vials. "Fiona," the fairy called out in a sing-song voice. "I've missed you so much, my darling child." I shifted toward the enchanting sound, finding myself alone with a pair of tiny, bloody fairy wings flapping across the floor. As I watched the ghastly spectacle, the wings chased me around the room. A phone ringing in the distance woke me from my imagined hell. As I sat up, drenched in sweat, I tried to shake off the nightmare, and the noise rang louder in my ears. I reached over and grabbed my cell phone. "Hello." My voice sounded strange and far away. "I'm not happy with you, Fiona." My father's voice on the other end caused my heart to beat hard against my rib cage. "Well, good morning to you, too, father." I refused to let him know how he affected me. "Don't change the subject. Running off with Kat on holiday without telling me is disrespectful, Fiona, and I've taught you better." I rolled my eyes and tried to calm my breathing. I left a note. Every part of me wanted to lambast him, but Rowan's words echoed in my ears. I had to pretend and muster as much grace and respect as possible. "Listen, I'm sorry I was so hard on you when we last spoke, but I needed time to take it all in. You should have done that alone without dragging Kat with you." His sarcastic, narcissistic tone was unnerving. I gritted my teeth and had to stop myself from hanging up on the cocky bastard. "Kat is my best friend, and I didn't want to go alone. We will be back soon." And I sensed he was buying my bullshit story. "You better be back soon. I expect you both home by Saturday," as I'm off to a convention on the Wednesday before. Although still half asleep, I mulled over his words, remembering that he was leaving for 3 days during the full moon, and smiled. I tried to act put out with him and frowned for full effect, hoping it would help convey my fake disappointment. That doesn't give us much time to enjoy New York. It's a big city, Fiona. Saturday, and I mean it. I sighed like a petulant child. "Any certain time Saturday, no. I won't be back home until Sunday morning, but I want you and Kat there when I arrive. So Wednesday through Sunday. That should give us ample time to search through everything. Is that it?" Holding my breath. Yes, the bastard hung up on me. However, I now had proof that he would be gone, and we could all go back to the house and hunt for information about Sexflex and more answers regarding my mother. I showered and dressed before looking for Rowan to tell him about my phone call from Cormac. But first, I wanted to see the files with those photos. But to my disappointment, I would have to wait. Again, when I found Rowan in his office with Rian and Kyra, they informed me he was leaving to find a witch. My head was still spinning from that one. He said it as if he was going to the shops to pick up bread or milk. So, Kat and I found ourselves seated in a home theater with Kyra watching a movie. A movie turned into two, a chick flick and a comedy that had us all in stitches. It did a lot to improve my uncertain and anxious mood. Mixed with the thrill of Rowan's kiss, I wanted to stop obsessing over it. It was just a kiss, right? Yet, it felt like more. I couldn't explain with words what that simple kiss meant to me. Simple wasn't the word to describe what it felt like. It was akin to an explosion in my mind and body. The female part of my brain, or perhaps my hormones, convinced me he was the one. Something shifted inside me when his lips took mine, and I knew I would experience nothing like it again. I felt a tug within me, a force pulling me toward Ro, and regardless of our extraordinary circumstances, you found your soulmate. He's the only one for you, as you are for him. My mind shouted with glee. I wish my brothers would get home, Kyra said, breaking into my wandering musings. I don't share the dislike of witches, not that I've met many, but I worry any time they interact outside our race with other creatures of primordial. She picked up the popcorn boxes, and Kat followed behind with a trash bag as they cleared our mess. They are fine. I gave her a tight-lipped smile, hoping it was true, although not one for empty words or platitudes. I wasn't sure what else to say. What can I do to help? Sorry. I was daydreaming. You're fine, and I know they are okay. It's silly of me to worry, especially after having such a grand time with you guys. Thank you. Rowan seldom lets me out of his sight, so I don't get to spend much time with females or girls my age. Kyra frowned for a moment before smiling at us. I joined in, and once we had picked up all the rubbish, we left the theater and headed to the kitchen, where Kyra pulled something out of the freezer. It's a casserole my mammy made before she left. All we have to do is heat it. She always leaves us prepared. She winked. Mammy is an excellent cook. Good. I'm suddenly starving. I rubbed my growing stomach. Should we set the table? Kat asked. My thoughts and hunger consumed me too much to be courteous, and I vowed to stop thinking of Rowan. Sure. Everything is in the cabinets behind you, and silver is in the drawer below. Kyra set the oven and pulled out some napkins. Salt. And pepper. What about the lads? Biting my lip. Set plates for them too. They never miss a meal, Kyra said and laughed. And sure enough, by the time the food was ready, Rowan and Rian rode into the kitchen, grinning while a short and beautiful female trailed behind. However, her demeanor differed from theirs. She inclined her head to acknowledge us, but her obstinate expression and stiff posture spoke volumes. Set another plate out. Kat, Rowan announced. Vione. This is Fiona and Kat. He held his hand out toward us. And this is Vione. She has been generous and agreed to check out our wounded pack members. Vione made a sound like a grunt and rolled her eyes. And I should head that way. You don't have to feed me, she said while staring between me and Kat, her eyes narrowing. I'm not too keen on breaking bread with werewolves, hybrids, and fairies. She crossed her arms and glared at Rowan before I saw Vione throw Rian an icy glare so frigid I felt it in my bones. He seemed to share the sentiment, and I heard a low growl deep in his chest. You know we are peaceful, Vione, Rowan assured her, and it's not hybrids and fairies. As far as we know, Fiona and Kat are both part human and fairy, if that helps. I stood with my mouth agape, wondering how she knew. She is a witch, I reminded myself, staring at her in awe. She was so tiny that something told me she was fierce, a force to be reckoned with. No, sorry, Alpha Wolf. They are not both hybrids. She pointed at Kat. The blonde is pure Phi. Capped the plate, and it crashed on the kitchen tile. How do you know? I asked before realizing I had spoken, while Kat scrambled to clean up the mess of broken porcelain scattered around her. Kyra was quick to join in to help. Duh, she said and rolled her eyes, placing her hands on her hips. I'm a witch. I know these things. That must be why Cormac has been doing experiments on her, Rowan said, his deep voice sounding severe. Pure fairy blood must have been like a dream come true for that wicked bastard. Vione laughed with sarcasm. You didn't know you were a fairy? She asked Kat before the color drained from her face. Wait, just a feckin' minute. Did you say Cormac? As in Cormac Wynne, and he has been experimenting with you? Her face contorted into something like disgust and fear. It's a long story, Rowan answered for a shaken Kat. Fiona is Cormac's daughter and removed their wings when they were young. Probably babies. Or so it appears. but they don't remember. Rian and I took several slow, cautious steps backward. I'm sorry, but I can't help you. She tossed her head, her long flaming red locks bouncing. I want nothing to do with this, or call me Quinn. As she turned to flee, Rian crossed the room into strides and grabbed her arm. Wait, damn it. Since when are you afraid of? Before Rian could finish his sentence, Rian cast her eyes down at the fist surrounding her arm and, in an instant, Rian let go, jumping away from her. He yelled, cursing in obvious pain. Damn you. To our agent extraordinaire, Ryland Noben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. She leaned in close, glaring at Rian with eyes tinged a strange shade of purple and her chest heaving. Never touch me again, little spare wolf. Or next time, I'll cause you more than some discomfort. Wait, I'm sorry about my brother. Viole, but we need you. And you owe me a favor. Rowan held up his palms and approached the witch with caution. Yes, and I will return that favor. But not when it has anything to do with that devil of a man. Cormac Quinn. Sorry. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Noban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. But what kind of fool has the man's daughter over for supper? He's a notorious hunter. She shook her head and teased at Rowan. Meanwhile, Rian had moved away from the witch, cradling his injured arm and scowling at her. His jaw hardened, and his eyes held pure animosity. You will heal soon, young wolf. Rian threw him a wicked grin, snapped her fingers, and disappeared, leaving behind a trail of purple smoke and a premonition filled with dread that had my hackles rising and my tummy clenching. Chapter 16. The Mean Fiddler warning contains graphic scenes. Rowan's POV. Damn, Fiona said, her eyes wide, staring at the spot once occupied by Rian and waving her hand to clear the purple smoke covering half of the kitchen. Did that just happen? It didn't. Now we'll play hell finding her again, I announced inside, raking nervous fingers through my hair. Isn't anyone gonna address the fact that I'm a pure fairy? Kat asked, holding the broken shards of glass, a look of bewilderment etched on her face. I'm sorry. Kat. Fiona reached out and rubbed her shoulder. I am still trying to process all this supernatural stuff. An actual witch just disappeared before our very eyes. Listen, Kat, it makes sense. I told her Quinn would never pass up the opportunity to study and experiment with a pure fairy. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Noban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. What, I thought you were human. I figured it might have been one of his more noble ventures, but people frown upon using humans for research. But everything he does, I frown upon. I bet he removed your wings so people would mistake you as a human, and he could continue his sick experiments. But my parents, why would they allow him to do it? Rian piped up. Think about it. Your parents were obviously both fairies, too, and they died in a plane crash. Right. Yes, but what does that prove? Kat asked, her voice cracking. Maybe Cormac had them killed. Rian shrugged with a sympathetic grimace. Or perhaps he was blackmailing them, and it forced your parents to give him permission. He stared at his feet, averting Kat's gaze. She stormed to the bin and dropped the broken plate inside and picked at her hands to remove the small pieces before glaring at Rian. Well done, Rian. Bloody brilliant, how you worked that out. Kat's eyes still rested on Rian, a challenge in them. A tumble in the sheets wasn't very memorable. Nor does it make you an expert on me or my family. Kat lifted her lips in a cocky sneer. Hey, that's not what Rian attempted. Shut up, Rian. Kat growled. So perhaps my parents didn't give a shit about me. That's what you're really saying. That they were selfish and cared more for themselves than their child. You have me pegged. Big guy. The unlovable Kat. She clapped her hands and stared at him with a deadpan expression. Well, my heart ached for Kat. My lips twitched, watching my brother with his enormous foot in his mouth. It seemed their romp between the sheets hadn't rendered Kat love, sick or impressed her much. I was enjoying her barbs piercing my brother where it hurt far too much. Ryan was used to the birds he bedded, falling head over heels. Not this one. Third play cat. Brian held out his palms, but I saw a muscle twitch in his jaw. She had wounded his ego. You and Fiona have had a lot happen, and I was only trying to be helpful. And I'm sure your parents loved you. We know Cormac's a sneaky and evil man, and I'm sorry for speculating. His expression grew rueful. Don't worry over me. I will find out why they let him remove my wings. Maybe he extracted theirs too, since my parents never walked around sporting wings. With her forehead wrinkled in concentration, she rubbed at a spot between her eyes. A fairy living among humans would have to be real powerful to suppress their wings. But if that was the case, they could hide their offspring's wings as well. I beetled my brows and looked over at my chastised brother, seeing the moment my words sank in. You're right. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Rian's brows rose to his hairline. But what does it mean? If they were powerful enough to hide their wings, why not hide mine and Fiona's instead of letting that beast of a man cut us up? Kat's eye had turned to an unfamiliar emotion as fat tears dripped from her eyes, spilling down her cheeks. Fiona placed her arms around Kat and whispered something before wiping the moisture from her friend's face. Kat nodded and returned the hug. I may be an alpha werewolf, but I'd be a liar if I said it wasn't a touching moment, and it made me uncomfortable. I cleared my throat. Let's eat. We will all feel better after a good meal. I held my grumbling stomach. Kat, I promised to find the answers you and Fiona seek. She smiled at me and we all headed for the table. Ryan made his way to the cabinet and took down a new plate for Kat. I figured it was his way of apologizing for being an insensitive ass. He reached Kat with a nervous smile and set the plate in front of her. She grunted without acknowledging him, and I coughed to cover my bark of laughter. Ryan shot me a "you're a bloody jerk" scowl before taking his seat. After a few moments of silence, while we all concentrated on the food, Fiona said, I did well speaking with Cormac this morning and he doesn't expect a thing. He thinks Kat and I are in New York and insists that we return by Saturday. That's fantastic. Lass, I ventured, concentrating on my meal. I'm not finished. She gave me a stony stare that felt like karma biting me on the ass after laughing at Kat chewing up my brother and spitting him out. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Please continue. I looked up from my plate, saw Aunt smirk, smiled at Fiona, and listened, giving her my full attention. I want the folders with the photographs before I proceed with any more details. Fiona met my smile with a serious and grim look. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I will hand them over as soon as we finish eating. Ryan, I have to go into the city. I wanted to go over them with you, but we can discuss everything in the morning. Wait. Shaking her head. You lads are going out this late. Into the city, yes. We have work to do concerning Sexflex and the shady witch to find again. I shrugged and watched her face turn pale. Are you going to look for more of those creatures or the people passing around the drug? Both. I avoided her gaze, pretending to be interested in my casserole. But it's so dangerous. Her voice just above a whisper. What if you have to fight something worse than that vampire thing? Ryan laughed, and I turned to him, furrowing my brow in disapproval before answering. We will shift into werewolf from if things get hairy, but we can handle ourselves. Less. And you have nothing to worry about now. Finished telling me about Quinn. Oh yeah. She shook her head, appearing to clear her thoughts. Cormac was angry with me from Kat, and he wants us home by Saturday because he's returning Sunday morning. He confirmed what we saw in his planner. He's leaving on Wednesday. That means we have 3 full days to search the house. Good job, lass. Let me grab the folders as soon as Rian and I get changed. You ready? Bro, After dressing in black and grabbing extra clothes in case we had to shape-shift, I met Rian in the kitchen where the girls sat sipping iced coffee. I watched Fiona stiffen as I neared her. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Lass, I avoided her eyes as I held out the files. These are disturbing. She stared at the offering, appearing hesitant, then glanced back at me before taking them with a clipped nod. The guards are outside and we will see you in the morning, I said with a weak smile. Please be careful. Fiona begged and stood to see us off. Walking around the table, Rian explained, these humans turned into creatures from Sexflex strike at night, and we must be there to hunt them down. It's how we've gained most of our information so far. He rubbed Fiona on the back as he passed her, steering clear of Cat. I wanted to punch his face in. We know what we are doing and will both return in hand. He winked, and she smiled at Rian, but it seemed strained. Enough flirting. Rian, we've got work to do. Good night, ladies. And Kyra, make sure they both have whatever they need. I strode from the room, vowing not to let Rian under my skin. As we entered the city, I headed for the nightlife, especially the clubs. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. And pubs were the young like to hang out. The zombies, vampires, and goblins liked fresh blood, and so far, those were the only creatures we found connected to Sexflex, but most of them was zombies or goblins. The vampire at the club where I met Fiona was a first for me. However, they all had one thing in common: they liked to hunt in the dark. And once a human became addicted to Sexflex, in time they turned into a bloodthirsty creature, and when night fell, they needed fresh victims to survive. We were on a mission to stop both the spread of the drug and hunt down these confused, insidious creatures. Unfortunately, they were pushing Sexflex quicker than we could kill off the resulting monsters. The results led to a lot of violent, unsolved deaths in the streets and alleyways of Dublin. Holy feck, Rian shouted, pointing toward a dark side street near a pub called the Mean Fissure, where the late crowd comprised mostly university students. And before I could spot what he'd seen, the dank smell of blood flooded my sensitive olfactory. I turned off the vehicle's lights and continued on before rolling to a stop, loading my dart gun containing a special poison and grabbing mesh metal gloves in my bag. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I asked as Rian pulled on his last glove. Let us do this. As we crept into the dark and alley behind the pub, the stench was overwhelming. We were close and it wouldn't be a pretty sight. Rian ran ahead of me, shifting as he turned the corner. Now I knew it was serious. Transforming in the middle of the city wasn't ideal and something we preferred not to do if we could help it. Once I rounded the corner, I saw the gruesome scene that caused Rian to shape-shift without care. A zombie and goblin fought over a woman whose limbs they had ripped from her body. For a moment, it satisfied the goblin to feast from her torn flesh, while the large zombie, grey, like death in ragged clothes, tore her chest open and I saw her still beating heart. The horrific spectacle made me slow to shift, but then I did so with urgency. Somehow the woman still screamed, a hair-raising sound filled with terror, and I wondered how she was still alive. While Rian pounced on the zombie, I noticed her eyes meet mine, and the anguish I saw there caused a red, hot rage to overtake me. With silent, stealth-like movements, I stalked my prey. The goblin, oblivious to my approach, continued to feast on the woman's arm, and I glanced at her, realizing the light was now gone from her eyes. I opened my enormous jaw, exposing my sharp werewolf teeth, and grabbed the creature by his neck. The attack was quick, leaving the goblin unaware of the impending danger. It howled in pain as I thrashed it left, right, and left again before dropping it to the ground. Its cry ceased, and I used my massive paw to roll the beast over, verifying that it would never again harm another. However, Rian was having a more difficult time with the zombie. I heard the crunch as his razor, like teeth, bit into the monster. Its putrid, smelling blood filling the air. Rian wretched, and I didn't envy him for chomping into the nasty, dead flesh. I shifted back and scrambled without clothes toward my ripped, destroyed clothes and grabbed the gun, hoping to stun the zombie so I could dig in my bag for the Glock. To kill a zombie, one had to decapitate or shoot them in the brain. But, as the dart entered near its heart, it crumbled to its knees and rolled around, screeching in misery. "Damn," I whispered when I noticed the mangled wings on its back. "You can shift back, Rian." I ran for my bag and grabbed a vial of lavender water, and our creature withered in agony, as we both stood without clothes in the alleyway behind the main fiddler. I threw Rian his clothes and dressed in haste. "What in the actual fuck?" Rian asked, looking from the wings zombie back at me. "It's worse than I thought," I told him. "Sexflex turns creatures of primordial too. Not just humans. Let me throw this rose water on it and see what happens. You know how fairies hate rose water." I rushed to the thrashing, wailing creature and the whole vial of liquid on it, causing a guttural cry as its flesh burned. "Shit, it was a fairy," Rian said. "This is going to get out of hand and affect all the races." I took my gun, pointing at its head, and put the poor bastard out of its suffering. Chapter 17, Forbidden Fruit, Second Draft. Rowan's POV. Our nighttime excursions aimed at uncovering more about the destructive drug, but the gruesome experience left me winded, bewildered, and furious. However, at this rate, Sexflex was taking too many human and supernatural lives. Our upcoming trip to Cormac Quinn's residence was my only hope for getting further information to aid in this crusade. I had no proof the bastard was involved with the drug, just a feeling deep in my gut. It made perfect sense with him being a scientist and owning stock in pharmaceutical companies. The dying fairy turned zombie flashed in my mind, causing my heart to ache, and I knew what must be done. I'd send a message to the creatures of Primordial Council requesting for all supernatural races to attend a meeting. Some wouldn't show, but I needed to get the word out that Sexflex wasn't just affecting humans. For all I knew, some of the other races might already be aware, but I had to make sure. The recent revelations had taken this drug war to a new level. Lost in our thoughts, we reached the SUV, and I was quick to hand him a bottle of water. Rian grabbed it and rinsed his mouth out several times, struggling to wash away the taste of rotten blood. I sat in the driver's seat and retrieved another water as I waited, handing it to him once he climbed inside. The plastic made loud cracking noises as Rian drained the bottle in one gulp. "Thanks, bro," he sounded out of breath. "No problem. Let's just drive through the city and see what we find." I cranked the engine and drove off. Neither of us spoke and kept our eyes peeled for more potential danger or attacks. And through our bond, I perceived our mutual thoughts. It was never easy watching an innocent person die, human or supernatural. As werewolves, we had no beef with innocent humans, only the ones who hunted us down. All those tall tales of the evil werewolves who roamed the night looking for humans to kill for the hell of it were fictional, just made up folklore stories by people with vivid imaginations or writers spinning yarns to sell books. When in reality, we kept to our own and wanted to live in peace. In the past, the races were always at war with one another, but times had changed. Until now, someone must take responsibility for the chaos Sexflex was causing. After an hour of driving around Dublin without further incident, I started toward home. I felt exhausted and needed to concentrate on informing the other races about our findings and also search Cormac's home from top to bottom. I'd look for Rian A later, but I wasn't looking forward to my next encounter with the witch. "Let's call it a night," I told Rian. "I agree," he ventured, still staring out the window as I passed the darkened streets and alleyways. "To my agent extraordinaire, my Lindelben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." "Back up or turn around. We've got action in the street we just passed that runs behind that disco." He threw his thumb over his shoulder. "Feckin' great." I slapped the steering wheel and cursed some more under my breath as I drove to the next street and found a place to turn around. "What is it? Did you see something?" "Rian. Some kind of battle with about 3 people. But that's all I could see. Let's hope it's a regular street fight with a few drunk idiots fighting over some bird." "One can hope." I agreed and drove back past the street to find what appeared as witches or warlocks fighting something dark and hunched over. And did another person stopped the SUV, watching the spectacle for a moment. I noticed one figure had long, curly blonde hair. "I see a female," I told Rian and I. "She's moving her hands. So my guess is she's a witch." As soon as the words left his mouth, bright light sprung from her fingertips, landing like a ball of flames engulfing the ominous creature. And its moans so loud it filled the SUV. "Looks like the witches and warlocks are where there's trouble brewing. But do they know the cause?" I glanced at Rian. "Do they know about Sexflex?" "I'm going to call a meeting to order," I told him. "Good idea. But they have this in hand. Let's go home. I'm too knackered to deal with any more witches." I put the car in drive, ready to pull off, when I saw something jump from the roof above the commotion. "Holy shit. Did you see that?" Before Rian could answer, a tall warlock threw out both hands, and the creature exploded as it landed. "Damn," Rian whispered. "Like you said. Bro, they got this. Get out of here before they see us and think we are the enemy. I don't feel like being blown to smithereens or torched tonight." "To my agent extraordinaire, Rian and I, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Rian gave a nervous giggle, and I sped off. As we pulled into the circular drive of our home, it surprised me to see Fiona sitting on the top step of the landing. What was she doing outside at this hour? Was she waiting for me? She hasn't slept because she was worried about us. The more time I spent around her, the easier it was for me to know what she was thinking. It was normal to read your mate's thoughts, especially after marking them. Even though I hadn't and couldn't mark her, I still detected parts of her musings and emotions. The closer I got to the house in Fiona, the more I felt her anxiety. "I swear I don't know how you have kept from marking her," Rian said, looking at me as I rolled to a stop in front of the house. Now was not the time for this debate again, but my brother continued to stare at me, his eyes seeming to burn holes in my skin. Instead of answering, I took in the lone figure of Fiona shivering in the cold, and my inner wolf grumbled. She stood, wrapping a thin sweater and arms around her petite body. A look of apprehension covered her face as she waited for us to exit the SUV. "I mean, if she was my mate." "Yes, so you said. You'd mark her in a heartbeat. But I'm not you and she's not your mate," I growled out in a menacing whisper as Fiona approached us, a tight smile gracing her lips, and I wanted to jump from the vehicle, take her in my arms and kiss away all the fear and tension I felt build inside her. Fiona may not be my mate, but she needs someone that cares enough to guide her through all this shite that's new to her. And I, keep your grubby paws off of her. I can guide her without marking her. I seethed through gritted teeth. "I forbid you to touch her, and I say that as your alpha, not brother. Besides, you've already bedded her best friend. So, now you want Fiona? To that's not what I meant. To my agent extraordinaire, Rian and I, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." "Whatever. Get out. Who knows how long she's been sitting out here in the cold waiting for us." He grunted and opened the door. Fiona smiled and ran toward Rian, throwing her arms around his neck. "I'm so glad you are both home and safe." She studied me over Rian's shoulder, and I felt the tinge of guilt coming off her in waves. Somehow she realized her actions, innocent or not, bothered me, and as she pulled out of the embrace and glanced at me, I knew it was me she wanted. With intuition guiding her, Fiona threw me a shy smile and followed Rian inside the house. I wanted to kick or punch something, preferably Rian, but realized it wasn't fair. This was my choice to make, and I made it. Now I had to stick by it, and it was a fucking challenge. especially with her in my house. I vowed that as soon as we searched her father's property, I would find somewhere safe for her and Kat. Somewhere Cormac Quinn would never find them. But Fiona had to go. I couldn't bring myself to go inside yet, so I wandered the property and updated the guards on my findings of the night. To my agent extraordinaire, Rian and I, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I approached the back door near the kitchen and hoped that Fiona had gone to bed. It was 3:30 in the morning and I figured she was in her room and I could calm down and have a whiskey in my office before turning in too. The house was silent as I made my way toward my destination with deft feet, closing the door behind me with a sigh. I couldn't risk being around Fiona tonight for fear that I would be careless and mark her. The stakes were even higher now that I had proved Sexflex turned supernatural races as well, and if her father was involved, it wouldn't be just my pack or the werewolf race out for blood. It would be the entire supernatural world. The thought caused me to sweat, and I ripped off my T-shirt in anger. My emotions were raging like an inferno inside me as I rushed to the window, unlocking it and shoving it open. I needed air. This cruel twist of fate had me in knots as I experienced rage, grief, and then shame at feeling sorry for myself when so many lives were at stake. But becoming alpha and finding my Luna were things I had dreamed of since I hit puberty. I had one, but not the other, and would have to learn to live an eternal existence as a lone alpha wolf without my mate. It's not fair. Despising myself, pity, and poured a double shot of whiskey, pacing the room. To my agent extraordinaire, Rian and I, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. May I come in? I turned in shock at the sound of her voice, unable to speak while she stood just outside the threshold, her hand on the doorknob. I downed a large gulp of whiskey, my eyes never leaving hers, and watched as she stepped inside and closed the door. You should be in bed, I told her as she rubbed her bare upper arms. We need to talk, but it's feckin' freezing in here. Fiona moved further into the room clad in a tiny pair of shorts and a white tank top before heading toward the leather couch and grabbing the throw blanket to wrap around her. Now is not the time for us to talk. Lass, trust me on that. I turned away and wandered to the window, noticing it was snowing. Why not? And I sensed her approaching. Damn it. Fiona, this is hard on me, and you are making it fucking impossible. Please leave me be tonight. I don't want to be an ass to you. I flinched as she placed her palm on my bearskin and my pulse raised from her touch. You are so warm, she purred, and I wanted to turn around, take her in my arms and carry her to the couch. I growled, the sound coming from deep in my chest. Fiona, I warned, don't do this to me. Not tonight. You are making this very tough for me. She ignored me and reached up, massaging my shoulders, and I knew I had to remove her from my office or flee like a coward. What's so troublesome about me touching you? Her voice sounded like silk and I dropped my head, succumbing to her ministrations. Fiona, I whispered, you're part human. Yes, and it's just a massage. I groaned from the pleasure. You're the daughter of Cormac Quinn. And again, it's just a massage. I jerked around to face her, grabbing her hands and holding them captive in mine. It's not just a massage. You don't get it yet, do you? Her eyes broadened, and she said, I get that there's something powerful between us and I'm drawn to you like no other. I dropped her hands and raked my fingers through my hair, sighing in frustration. It's so much more than that. Lass, then why not explore it? She whispered and reached up, pushing the hair from my eyes. Because I can't. It's too dangerous. I searched her eyes for understanding, finding only lust and something more. The love of my mate. But we are alone, Fiona said. Who would know? She winked and shrugged her pretty shoulders, losing all common sense. I dipped my head, taking her lips in mine, kissing her with an unleashed passion she matched. I lifted Fiona under her plump bum as her legs wrapped around my waist, and a blanket fell to the floor. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode of the story, please give it a like, And don't forget to subscribe to get notifications for updates.